guys are going to continue to get cut. But let's start with who could replace DPJ. We'll see with Darius Fountain. Haven't read anything yet, but we'll see who they can add to the room. The first person I'm going to start off with is a name that I saw very hot on social media today, and that is Tim Patrick. Because Ari Marov at My Sports Update on X put out a surprise. The Broncos are expected to move on from wide receiver Tim Patrick and are looking at trade possibilities. I think he was just released. I could be wrong.
Yeah, he was.
So disregard the trade. He's released. So
Tim Patrick just got released?
He got released. Like, I don't know where the trade came from. He's been like released.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he got released, but we'll see. Regardless, Patrick had a great preseason, and he's returning from back-to-back years of significant injuries. So that's the first person a lot of Lions fans are talking about. Big guy, 6'4", had a pretty good preseason. Would it be a guy you'd like to add in your room? I mean, I'll wait a sec. I mean, I don't know.
I love Tim Patrick.
Okay.
I mean, this is what the Tim Patrick's a guy is your wide receiver 4 or 5 outside of his torn ACL and torn Achilles, which happened to back-to-back seasons, unfortunately. Brad Holmes usually tends to like those guys. He was a wide receiver 3 since he stepped foot in the NFL, and he was undrafted out of Utah. He's 6'4", 212 pounds. He can block his ass off. He also went on 123 straight targets without a drop. So he's the definition of reliable. In the red zone, that's where he really flourished. Where did Josh Reynolds flourish? In the red zone when Jared Goff needed to move off Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta. So Tim Patrick, to me, yeah, you're worried about the injuries, but at what cost? And who else do you have that's better than Tim Patrick right now at the X spot? Literally no one. You don't have a true X wide receiver. That is Tim Patrick. He's not going to have the burst that he was, but he's a very physical wide receiver. And like we said, at that wide receiver 4 spot, you're asking the guy to do pretty much two things. Know your assignment and block. You got to run the slant route. You got to run the hitch route. You got to run the go route and occasionally probably run the post route. There's obviously going to be different factors in there, but if you can do that, when you're asked to, just run the route to make sure that the other concepts going around them stay on their track. And then when they run the ball with David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, block your ass off. Those are all things that Tim Patrick can do. If he were to come to Detroit, I think his last 2 years in Denver, he had like 700-plus yards. I don't expect him to come into Detroit and get 700-plus yards. But even after major injuries, Tim Patrick is absolutely a guy that can go get you 300 yards, 2 touchdowns, and give you effort in the run game. So I'm all for Tim Patrick. There's nothing to lose here at all.
Yeah, to that too. And by the way, guys, I just want to do this. I don't think he's released. They said that he is the Broncos are moving on, but they said the Broncos are moving on and they're exploring trade options. That was reported about 3 hours ago, unless there's something new. So like I think essentially they're saying, hey, we're done. I think it's when
assets for him.
Yeah, I think when teams do that, especially a guy like Tim Patrick, who people are going to want, like teams like the Lions, who are 27th on the waiver wire, are going to be sitting there and they're like, hey, we need to make a move to be able to get an opportunity, or someone in front of us, 26 teams in front of us are going to have an opportunity to be able to pick him up. So that's where I think it comes down to with him. I'm in, and I get it too. Like I completely understand the injury situation, like an Achilles injury, especially as a wide receiver, an ACL, like those are 2 major injuries. And realistically, like you just never know what a guy's going to be like when he comes back from that. Now the thing with Tim Patrick is like when he did play the last 2 seasons before he gets hurt, back-to-back 700-yard seasons, and on top of that, I'm pretty sure he had 5 touchdowns 1 year and 6 the other. The thing with him, and this is where it comes down, like the DPJ situation, and this is why again it gets me even going more with DPJ. You're not expected to do much. Like Tim Patrick comes in here. He's not expected to go out there and put 700 yards up. It is 300 to 400 yards, a couple touchdowns in the red zone if we need a big body, things like that. Like, again, if a guy goes down, maybe we need you to step up a little bit more for a game here or there in the playoffs. Hey, if someone needs to step up, hey, Tim Patrick, we need you, man. Come on, Tim, give me something. So, like, that's like the Tim Patrick role for me. I'm not looking at him to go out there and give you that 700 yards before he got hurt and had the 2 major injuries. Like that, you don't need that. You need 300-400 yards, a big body guy to take something away down the field so you can open up other guys. Like, guys, for Tim Patrick, he is coming into a perfect situation. Coming off an injury, you do have like Amon-Ra, Jameson Williams, Khalif Raymond, Sam Laporta, Brock Wright, Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery, Ben Johnson, the best offensive line in the NFL. Like a guy coming off an injury who has had success in his career and is just like, hey, I just need another opportunity. This is like one of those comeback stories where you're like, hey, he just got put back in the perfect situation. He's a vet. He knows what his career is at this point because he's been injured and he's gone through that for the last 2 years. And now it's like, hey, we're going to take a bunch off of your plate, and this is all we need you to do. Come in and be a Dan Campbell type of guy. And I've never heard, and I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. And in the chat, I've never heard anything bad come out about Tim Patrick being a bad teammate, a bad person in the locker room. So like, this is like, it could be like this could be a perfect fit. And again, it's, you know who he is. Like, you've seen him in the NFL. It's not like a DPJ. He had the one good year. Like, Tim Patrick's been very consistent his whole career. The only downfall, and it is a big downfall, is the 2 injuries. That's it. And I know, hey, Brad likes injured guys, but I get, hey, if you have a problem with it, and Jeff, I'll let you go. I understand, but I think like that is like, if you were to like write up the ideal fit for the Detroit Lions wide receiver room right now, it would just be like Tim Patrick.
Yeah, and I love, my favorite thing is when we bring up Tim Patrick, and it's like, yeah, like all the things, you guys made some great points, by the way. Like, this isn't to, come at your points. It was awesome. I was listening. I was engaged. And then we just say, well, he just had 2 injuries. He just had 2 injuries.
What a great way to 100% us.
He just had 2 injuries. Torn Achilles and a torn ACL. That is a little worrying. He's got the Klay Thompson. I mean, that's what I would call that, essentially. And that is concerning. I wouldn't mind. I'm not trading for him. No way in hell. Or to quote Rob Parker, no way, no how. All right, I'm trading for Tim Patrick. I think they'll cut him, and then you could sign him and bring him in. That's fine. I don't have an issue bringing him in. I'm not in love with it, though. I'm not in love with it. A player that I am starting to like, John Mechie the third. All right. And now there's teams reaching out to, if you want to trade for a player, this is who you trade for. All right. And I'll explain why in a second, because the former second round pick out of Alabama had a big preseason. Texans aren't going to be able to keep all these guys. And if they're going to trade away John Mechie, I'm on board. That's a player I would like to add for a couple of different reasons. One, I know people say, well, he's a slot. Last year for the Texans, he lined up 182 times. He lined up 100 times out wide. All right. And in Alabama, he lined up plenty of times out wide. I know he plays in both. He played 81 times in the slot last year, 100 times out wide. I think for him, that's not only a player that I like that can play football, but I think in terms of big picture, he can be your future Khalif Raymond replacement. And he's under contract for a couple of years. So I'm open to, if you're going to trade for a player, it'd be him because he's young. We all remember John Mechie played with J-Mo, I'm pretty sure. I don't know if that's true or not. I don't know. I can't remember. But Brad loves Alabama guys. So I get people say he's a slot. He's 6 foot, lined up more times out wide last year than in the slot, played plenty out wide at Alabama. Saying he's strictly a slot is not true based on how they used him. He can play in the slot, but I'm open to that idea. Guys, I get adding a true X. Like I understand that. And there's going to be guys that are available. I like Robert Woods, even though he's not really a true X, but there'll be guys out there. If you want a guy that can go get you a 50-50 ball or a jump ball, there's guys out there that you're going to be able to get. So, John Mechie's a guy that if you're going to trade for, I like because of kind of his versatility. And again, he can play special teams, but I know you have Isaiah Williams, but I like, that's a guy that's available for trade that I would be open to. For anyone else, wait till someone's cut and go sign them. That's where I'm at. Tim Patrick, I'm not in love with, but I don't hate it. I don't hate it. Just the injuries do concern me, though, guys, more probably than others. But I'm a little more worried. And I think he's like on the other side of 30. He's like 30, turning 31 with 2 back-to-back like catastrophic injuries. It is a little concerning for me.
I mean, it's a little concerning. I'm not going to lie, but then you look at the preseason, he looks healthy again. He came back last week, had a touchdown, 4 receptions off 4 targets. So I think Tim Patrick, he's still going to be Tim Patrick, not as explosive, but you know what you're going to get out of him. With John Mechie, I love the player, but I just think you already have 4 guys that can play inside and outside. I think if add him to the roster, that's fine, but I don't think that's your solution at X because we'll get into it more, but there's a very realistic where after tomorrow, the Lions only have 4 wide receivers on their team. So if you're talking about add John Mechie as depth, I'm all for it. But as figuring out that X spot, that's what I think the Lions need to prioritize. If they're going to move off assets, go get another guy besides John Mechie. But if you're able to get somebody off waivers, Texans are calling, hey, Noah Brown, John Mechie, Robert Woods. I think all those guys are similar type wide receivers. John Mechie can line up outside just because he's got a bigger build. Like he's a little stockier than like the Robert Woods and the Noah Browns and the Tank Dells that they got going on there. But that's not a guy where I think you stick on the outside and you're like, cool, that's who we're going to leave there. I think he's somebody you got to kind of, if you're going to put him on the outside, put him in motion, kind of get him going before the play so he can kind of maneuver leverage. I don't hate it. Second round pick out of Bama. He was very solid. Obviously had cancer and he's come back and made a career out of it. Had a good preseason. So if the Lions bring him in, I don't have a problem. I just don't think that's the solution.
I will say this, and I want the people to know this, like keep this in mind. And I'll put a guarantee on this. The Detroit Lions will bring in a fifth wide receiver that's not on the roster currently. Like that is a guarantee. For Darius Fountain to put out the tweet that says, wow, like the only other person, like essentially the only other two guys who are in the wide receiver battle that's left on this roster that we have not heard that is cut is Darius Fountain and Isaiah Williams. And I don't see them cutting both.
You ain't going to hear Isaiah Williams.
So Isaiah Williams is in, and Darius Fountain's the one that he's tweeting out, wow, so he's out. So like it is a lock that they are going to look and bring someone in. Now, Jeff, I don't hate the John Mechie thing. I do think, like to Klotz's point, like dude, we had like Isaiah Williams. You have Khalif, you have Amon-Ra. Like those are like even Jamo, you could say like you just basically have a wide receiver room with all the guys that do the same exact things. To where if you're trying to look to kind of, hey, get a couple, like Dan said in the press conference today, he was like, I say it all the time. We would love to have every single type of different option on this football team. Like we would love to have a big time X. We would love to have a perfect guy in the slot, a guy that can do both. Someone who, you know, Jahmyr Gibbs who can do what he does. Like he was like, we would love to have all of that, but it's like, is it realistic? Sometimes maybe not. But like the Tim Patrick thing makes it a little more realistic if you're looking at it like that. Like the John Mechie thing, he's still young too, and he has a full career ahead of him. So maybe if you bring him in and you're like, hey, we could work with him and we can get him in and kind of see what he's like and kind of get a feel for it. And then Tim Patrick, you still get a Tim Patrick in and he's your guy.